Back in 2012, I believe I stopped the apocalypse. I remember staring down at the endless hole in the desert with wonder and awe. It seemed to go on forever. A lifelong friend of mine named Bear stood by my side. He scanned the ground and found a large, smooth rock. It must have weighed at least 60 pounds. He rolled it over to the edge of the seemingly infinite void and let it drop. I heard the stone clatter against the walls, smashing against one side and releasing a rush of small pebbles and clods of dirt. They soared downwards with the rock, reminding me of the sands in an eternal hourglass. "Look, there's stairs," Bear's girlfriend Stephanie said, pointing a freshly painted red nail at the steps. They looked hewn from solid rock and spiraled down into the darkness far below. Stephanie tilted her head slightly to the side, moving locks of dirty blonde hair away from her eyes. Her appearance reminded me of Emma Stone, and though nearly 25, she still looked like a teenager. We stood in the middle of Death Valley. The sun sizzled overhead, sending out blinding light that reflected off the sands. Rippling mirages rose off the burning hot ground. Dunes surrounded us, looking as dead and lifeless as an alien planet. I looked up at the light blue sky and didn't see a single cloud. It must have been 100 degrees out. Rivulets of sweat trickled down from my hair and forehead, stinging my eyes. I wiped it away, looking back down the hole. I kept expecting this aberration of a pit to evaporate like some sort of bizarre optical illusion, yet there it still stood. A large circle about 30 feet across with ancient granite steps. And, of course, the steps had no railings. They looked fairly narrow, maybe a couple feet across. Well, I considered that narrow, considering the thousands of feet of empty space I would fall through if I slipped. I thought about how the drop would feel, screaming for minutes, and knowing I was about to die, the ground coming up to meet me, the air roaring like a tornado in my ears. I shuddered. The mental image seemed far too vivid. I glanced at my two friends. Bear was casually smoking a cigarette, raising his tattooed hand. I looked at the tattooer reptilian, slitted eye surrounded by the golden spiral. He stood much taller than me. Having done physical labor his entire life, he also had a thick covering of muscle. He was a metalhead, an urban explorer, and about 90% of his body was covered in tattoos. Stephanie, and he made an unusual pair, she with her straight edge, valley girl looks, and Bear looking like he just climbed out of a mosh pit at a dayside show. He flicked the half-smoked butt into the pit, smoothing his long black hair with his hands. I watched the red light of the ember streak across the darkness and disappear into the endless shadows waiting below. "Do you think anyone else knows about this?" I asked. Bear had a sly grin across his scruffy face. His blue eyes flashed with amusement. He put his arm around Stephanie. "Well, if no one has, maybe we can make money off of it," he said. Stephanie smiled faintly at that. "I've heard of people who discovered caves making money off giving tours. Maybe we can buy this crappy little plot of land out here." "This might be state land," I said. "Actually, it might even be federal. I'm not sure where the borders of the national park end. Not like anyone would be going around labeling borders out here." I waved my hand lethargically at the dead, sunburnt desert all around us. Absolutely no one lived out here, except maybe the secret mutant descendants of the Manson family. "Regardless, we should go explore it," Stephanie said. "If we're going to claim we discovered some new wonder of the world, we should be able to tell people what's in it." "Yeah, and what if we get lost and starve to death down there?" I asked. "There's no cell service out here. No one would ever find our bodies. We would just disappear into thin air. We can't even call anyone to let them know where we are." "That's part of the adventure," Stephanie said, laughing. "You weren't complaining when you dragged us all to that abandoned mental asylum and took us to the underground tunnels." "I'm with Stephanie," Bear said, gesticulating crazily with his hands. "I want to go explore. I think it would be awesome to have a cave system named after us. We still have flashlights and plenty of food and water in the car. I have lighters and knives, cigarettes, and booze. Hell, even my pistol. Not like I think we'll need it, unless there's rattlesnakes down there that we need to shoot." In hindsight, it was amazing just how wrong he was. We each had a backpack filled with goods. Since we had been traveling across California and camping, seeing every national park possible, we had plenty of extra supplies. In fact, the issue became the amount of weight each of us could carry. I had them fill the backpacks with as much food and water as possible, leaving only room for ammunition, jackets, and some extra clothes. "You act like we're going to be down there for the next year," Stephanie complained, rolling her eyes as she hefted the heavy backpack around her shoulder with a soft grunt. "All right, let's do this." I am so excited right now. I feel like Bilbo Baggins must have when he walked out his front door with Gandalf. Bear grinned like a madman, lighting up another cigarette. Without a word or a moment of hesitation, he put his backpack on and jumped down to the first step, a drop of about 5 feet. My stomach did flips just watching him. He apparently had no fear of heights at all. As I looked down on Bear, it struck me how perfect the circular formation of the pit was. It almost looked man-made or somehow unnatural. Nature rarely works in straight lines and perfect circles, after all. Stephanie went next, lowering herself carefully from the edge and hanging down by her arms until her feet were securely on the step. Unlike Bear, who at times I thought might be slightly insane, she did not simply jump onto the stone. I edged closer to the pit, looking down. A sense of vertigo overtook me. The eternal blackness of the void seemed like a dilated pupil, a staring eye. I felt watched from below, but I was not going to look like a chicken shit in front of my friends. They were both clearly excited, especially Bear, who started hopping from one foot to another, anxiously looking up at me and waving me on. He reminded me of a puppy excited about going on a walk. They had already started descending and stood a few dozen feet below the first step. With a thudding heart, I followed Stephanie's example, slowly lowering myself down from the ledge onto the first step. Once secure, I looked down. The circling stairs almost seemed like a slit-open conch shell, the swirling golden spiral extending into forever. My friends looked so small standing on those unceasing steps, and for a moment, my intuition screamed at me, "Get out, get out." But instead, I took a deep breath and started the descent into the bottomless pit. We traveled for hours. I lost track of time. All of our phones stopped working, and even though I had just charged mine, the screen simply went black. Stephanie's watch stopped ticking after a few minutes descending. I didn't know if there was some kind of magnetism in the pit that disabled electronic devices, but regardless, we no longer had any way to tell time. "God, how long has it been?" Stephanie asked after our 5th break. We sat on the steps, our headlamps sending eerie bouncing shadows all around us. A few of the steps nearby had thin, jagged cracks running through the stone, branching like lightning bolts. I wondered if they would crumble under our feet as we passed. "It feels like at least 6 or 7 hours, Bear said, no longer as excited as he was at the start. Part of it was undoubtedly fatigue, which we all felt. I had a creeping suspicion we had made a colossal mistake by coming down here. Bear still had a sense of determination, however, and he wanted to keep going. "How far down do you think we are?" No one answered. The air felt oppressive and extremely heavy. "What do you want to do if we don't find anything in the next hour or so?" I asked. "I mean, are we just going to keep going down forever? We should make a plan to turn around at a certain point." "Oh man, give me a break," Bear said, rolling his eyes. "What in the hell do you have to do today? You act like this isn't the coolest thing we found on this trip. We should keep going down until we find something, or until we need to turn around because we're running low on water and food. This is probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, man." I sighed. My legs ached and my feet screamed at me. I could feel the blisters rising on my toes. We rose and started descending again. It was then that we heard a sound like a lion roaring echoing up from far below. It sounded predatory and animalistic, but magnified to a deafening cacophony like an exploding hydrogen bomb. The stairs began to shake. Falling streams of dust and pebbles streamed down all around us. I tried to scream, but I didn't know if I actually was, because all I could hear was that demonic roar. I clung to the wall of the pit as the sound started to fade, and then rapidly died down to nothing. Within a few seconds, it had passed. I looked at Bear and Stephanie. They looked pale and shaken in the bright LED lights of the headlamp. "Jesus Christ," Bear said, his hands trembling as he reached into his pocket for his pack of cigarettes. I thought I was going to die for a few seconds there. He had succinctly expressed all of our thoughts, I felt. "We can't keep going down," I said. "This is insane. What if that was an earthquake? What if there's more aftershocks coming? We should start heading back up now. I'm not dying here, Stephanie." And Bear nodded, agreeing without any argument. Even Bear, who was normally fearless, seemed to have lost all of his enthusiasm for this adventure. But when we turned and shone our headlamps up, I saw the stairs a few hundred feet above us had collapsed during the bone-rattling explosion of sound. About 30 feet of steps had simply vanished, crumbling into the void. I suddenly felt very much less secure standing there. I wondered how structurally sound the step I stood on really was. My heart felt like it would beat right out of my chest. "Well, I guess the only way out is forwards," Stephanie whispered in a frightened voice. "Maybe this cave or whatever it is has branching tunnels that lead back up. Something this massive has to have more than one way in and out." I didn't really agree with her. However, this pit was not a natural cave system. As far as I could tell, we had no idea if other paths led out. We kept descending. I clung close to the wall in case that ear-splitting cacophony started again. I wondered what had made it. Perhaps the echoes of shifting tectonic plates amplified as they rose up the pit and just sounded like a predator's thundering cry. Far below, my headlamp ran over an aberration in the smooth golden spiral of the endless steps. I saw a massive archway, at least 10 feet tall. Its sides met in a point at the top, forming an upside-down curving V. Bear and Stephanie saw it at the same time as I did. Their eyes widened in surprise and delight, but a sense of fear gripped me when I saw the archway. Its architecture looked alien. As we got closer, I saw it glisten like obsidian. Gleaming black rainbows ran over its length when our lights touched it. "Oh, thank God," Stephanie cried. Bear ran ahead, sprinting down the steps like a man dying of dehydration running towards water. "Hey, wait up," I called, feeling suddenly very vulnerable. I looked down the stairs. Far below me, I saw a thin crack that ran down the wall of the pit for hundreds of feet. I caught a glimpse of a face peeking out of it. The creature had bone-white skin and pure black eyes. Its features seemed a combination of human and demon. Its insane rictus grin showed many sharp, long teeth. Within a fraction of a second, though, it disappeared into the crack, and I wondered whether I had really seen it. Perhaps all the darkness had caused me to start hallucinating. I knew that prolonged sensory deprivation could cause hallucinations and potentially bizarre experiences. Having tried sensory deprivation tanks both sober and after eating magic mushrooms, Stephanie and Bear stood in front of the obsidian arch, peering down a massive stone tunnel. The ceiling towered 30 feet overhead. Sharp stalactites hung over our heads like waiting guillotines. Natural formations of glimmering marble and jewels jutted out of the walls of the light brown rock. Bear ran forwards, laughing. He stopped at the first cluster of gems he saw. They looked like the petals of a multicolored flower, green, white, red, blue, and black. "These are diamonds," Bear said, awed. "This is opal. This looks like jet stone. That's definitely a sapphire. And the one next to it is an emerald." He stood up straight, looking back at me, his mouth hanging open. "Holy hell, Juan, we're rich. None of us will ever have to work again. We still don't even know how to get out of here," I reminded him. I kept checking our backs, and I thought I had glimpsed that white, staring face with the black eyes again, but it moved like a ghost. Every time I tried to shine the light where I thought I glimpsed something, there was nothing there. I felt like I was losing my mind. We kept walking for a few minutes. Smaller tunnels branched off the large ones periodically. We would hear soft moaning sounds and whispers coming from them. I could never pick out any words, as it came across as more of a low susurration, but it had the cadence and rhythm of speech. "That is so creepy," Stephanie whispered after we had passed our fourth branching tunnel. "It sounds just like voices and people whimpering, as if there were some medieval torture chamber over there. It's gotta be some natural echo from the earth," I said. "There are sometimes subterranean rivers and waterfalls. If one was nearby, its babbling could get distorted in the tunnels and come across as whispering." But I didn't really believe the argument myself, even though I badly wanted to. "Oh my God," Bear said. He was out in front, walking ahead of us by at least 10 feet, so he ended up seeing the two bodies first. He started running, kneeling down over the girls, Stephanie, and I followed a few seconds later. They looked like two high school students, still wearing their backpacks covered in pins about love and peace. The nearer of the two girls was clearly dead. Her entire body had swollen up like a tick after feeding, the skin turning green as rancid gases bubbled under the surface. I couldn't even tell if she once had eyes or a mouth because the flesh had expanded so much. Her bloated body pulled against the fabric of her short-sleeved t-shirt, skirt, and straps of her backpack. The other girl was a somewhat different story. At first, I thought she was dead too. I couldn't see any breathing, and she looked extremely pale with a blue tint to her lips. Bear knelt down and tried shaking her. He got no response. Then he licked the back of his hand and held it in front of her mouth and nose. After a few seconds, he looked up excitedly. "She's breathing, though it is very slow and shallow," he said. "I don't know what's wrong with her." Her eyes started to flutter open and she gasped. Her fingers clenched and she licked her dry lips. "Water," she moaned. "Please, water." Bear immediately grabbed a bottle from his pack and held it up to her lips. She took small sips, pulling away and breathing hard after each one, but soon she had finished the entire bottle, then 2 more. The color started to return to her cheeks slightly, though that bluish cast stayed over her fingernails and lips. She motioned for us to get close, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. "I'm not going to make it out of here alive," she said. "This was given to me by someone else. It's the only reason we've made it this far." She coughed, rolling on her side and vomiting some of the water. I saw streaks of blood mixed in, dark red like a garnet. Bear looked at the piece of paper, frowning. He stood back up and turned to face us. Then he started reading out loud. "The first rule to survival is this: when you see the angel of death, the woman with the backwards facing head, you must cut your flesh and give an offering of blood immediately. The second rule is that if you hear the first trumpet blow, you must hide. Anyone who does not leave the main tunnel by the time the second trumpet blows will know undying agony. The third rule is that if you see dark silhouettes coming down the corridors, shadows in the shapes of men and beasts, you must close your eyes and count to 30. They are eaters of souls and will suck your soul out of your eyes if you give them the chance, yet they will pass if not fed. The fourth rule is that if you encounter anyone with the mark of Cain, you must kill them immediately. You will know the mark of Cain. When you see it, it is a most hideous thing. The fifth rule is that if you see the ruler of the bottomless pit, whose name is Abaddon, you must not look at his face." They all stood in silence for a long moment. I felt the strong urge to laugh. Then I looked down at the swollen body of the dead girl and immediately changed my mind. The blonde girl yanked her backpack off, gasping and spitting blood constantly. She reached around in the back, frantically looking for something. With a triumphant smile across her pretty face, she yanked it out and handed it to me. I took the ancient leather-bound Bible. It looked like it had some traces of a white, shining crystal smeared across its cover. I opened the cover and saw someone had written in spiky, copperplate handwriting, "Property of Smiley." A bookmark hung out of the back of the text. I opened it up and gasped. The bookmark was actually a tiny, mummified pinky finger. It looked like someone had cut it off a small child's hand. It smelled woodsy with a hint of pistachio, cinnamon, and sulfur. I have never smelled anything quite like a mummified body part. "Oh my God," Stephanie cried, putting her hands above her mouth. "Is that a child's finger?" The girl didn't answer. She had collapsed on her stomach now, and she looked like she was rapidly worsening. "Who are you? How did you two get here? Why do you have someone's finger?" I asked. The girl shook her head. "No time for all that," she said. "I got a glancing blow of the poison, a very small dose, but it's doing its work nonetheless. I can feel it writhing like snakes through my blood." She closed her eyes for a long moment, breathing slow. Then she fixed her unsteady, watery eyes on us again. "My name is Bella, though. I'll tell you that we came here by accident, exploring underground tunnels with my rainbow family. We got lost, and the tunnel started changing." A shriek echoed from further down the main tunnel, cutting her off. Bella's eyes flew wide open, bright spots of red showing on her pale face. She began hyperventilating. They're coming back," she cried. "Oh God, help me." I saw a shape far away, like a galloping horse. My mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing for a moment. It looked totally alien, something not from this world. There was a sound like helicopter blades slicing through the air, jarring and rhythmic. As it got closer, I saw a bizarre and monstrous creature. It looked almost like a giant flying scorpion. It was about the size of a Great Dane. Its legs writhed and skittered like massive alien eyelashes. I saw its stinger dripping clear, lethal venom, as if it were salivating through its tail. Its spiky wings looked like those of a dragonfly's, blurring in a sea of motion as they propelled it forward. It was, in reality, the face that affected me most. However, it had a human face, complete with changing expressions. It had no hair on its body, but even without eyebrows, I could see the scowl of bloodlust and fury. The eyes had a filmy look, as if covered in cataracts. The pupils looked faded behind the veil, the irises a muddy gray. Bristling spikes stood out the top of its head, black, pushed back quills with barbs on the end. Overall, the creature was one of the most instinctually repugnant and frightening creatures I had ever seen. Bear and Stephanie stood there, their mouths opened, just staring. Bella tried to crawl away. She had thrown her backpack to the side. "No," she moaned. "No, Bear." I cried. "Shoot it. Shoot the goddamn thing." What are you waiting for? He looked like a man waking up from a nightmare for a moment, his eyes moving quickly around before focusing on me. Then a smile broke out on his face. With the creature only a few steps away, I thought we were all dead. But in a blur, Bear yanked the giant black pistol from its holster. With a booming echo like a shout from God, he fired at the abomination's eerily human face. The head exploded in a fountain of bone splinters and bright blue blood. Its wings continued to pound the air crazily, and the body continued coming at us for a few more feet. Then it crashed to the ground, sliding, its stinger and tail still striking out at the air. I jumped back and saw Bear and Stephanie do the same. It landed on top of Bella, soaking her in its blood. She screamed. The stinger continued to drip clear poison from its wicked-looking barb. I saw drops of it sliding off the creature's body and onto Bella's skin. It burns, she cried, trying to wipe away the poison. But she was on her stomach, and with the creature pinning her down, she couldn't reach. Like some ancient Chinese water torture, the drops continued to fall, searing and lethal. I need help, guys, Bear said, as he tried to lift the heavy creature off Bella, Stephanie, and I went around, giving the stinger and poison a wide berth. I reached under its body. It felt slimy, cold, and just revolting. It was like the texture of drowned earthworms after a summer rain. As I pushed, I felt a sogginess in its skin, and blue blood the color of antifreeze soaked my hands. I wanted to pull away. I felt soiled. I wanted to take a long shower and wipe the filth of this creature off me. The body started to lift. With a grunt, the three of us pushed it off Bella. I looked down at her and realized it was too late. Her eyes rolled back in her head, showing only the whites. Her legs began to kick violently, her fingers spasming. As her arms jumped and danced, she began to make a choked, gasping sound. Then her skin started to turn a sickly, cancerous green. Her whole body began to swell before her eyes. She gave a death gasp and stopped kicking, finally falling limp. As we left the corpses behind, still shaken, Bear looked at the Bible Bella had given us. Juan, why do you think there's a human finger in here? Stephanie asked, still repulsed by it. Is that some sort of occult thing? Maybe witchcraft? I shrugged. I knew a lot more about history and books than either Bear or Stephanie. They almost never read, while I read constantly. Fingers have been used in occult rituals for thousands of years. In the ancient Buddhist scriptures, a madman, an extremely talented warrior, used to go around killing random people and taking their fingers for a necklace. They called him Angulimala, or finger necklace. There may be some relation to worship of Kali, the goddess of destruction. He ended up converting to Buddhism, renouncing violence, and becoming enlightened. Though, in modern rituals, witchcraft still uses severed fingers. Fingers represent dexterity, touch, and manipulation of faraway objects. Cutting off a finger also symbolically represents a cutting of ties in an occult ritual. I shrugged. Well, thank you for that enlightening information, chatbot, Stephanie said jokingly. You remind me of those AI robots, where you can ask them any random question, and they come up with an answer. Hey, don't trash about me just because I actually do research, I said, smiling. Speaking of research, what page of the Bible is the finger marking? It may be important. Those girls had two things, after all, the list of rules and the Bible. Bella obviously considered them important, because those were the only two things she singled out to give to us while she was dying. Bear opened the Bible to the page with the finger. He looked down, frowning. It's Revelation 9, he said. Then he began reading aloud as we all took a break, passing around water and peanut butter crackers. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. He stopped reading, his voice reverberating eerily down the stone corridor, bouncing off of priceless gems and hard sandstone. So that thing we killed was a locust? Stephanie asked. It looked a lot more like a scorpion to me. It doesn't really matter, it's neither a scorpion nor a locust, I said. It's clearly a different species from either. Perhaps it's lived down here for millions of years, hunting in the dark, but it just makes it all the more important to find a way out of here as soon as possible. There could be thousands of those things down here. Millions, maybe. I mean, really. Who knows how big this place is? Sighing, we got up and continued looking for a way out. Ahead, I saw a faded sign. It looked made out of pure silver, without a sign of rust anywhere, but the letters had nearly disappeared over the many years it had clearly stood here. When we got close, I brought my light right up to it and tried to make it out. After a few seconds, I realized it was a sign for a town. Bloodstone, population 144,000, it read. The faded, ancient sign for the town seemed to point down a smaller branching corridor to our left. There were no gyms or high caverns on this path. It seemed like some ancient civilization had carved the narrow corridor out of the stone itself. A path a few feet wide stretched out in front of us, going totally straight, as far as the eye could see. Which way? There asked. Stephanie looked excitedly down the path to Bloodstone. Population 144,000, at least if I believed the sign. Obviously towards the town. We don't know where this main tunnel leads. It could just go on forever. If there's a town, there's people, she said. There's no goddamn town down here, I said. Are you nuts? Who would live down here in the darkness? She shrugged. They walked for hours down the carved stone trail to Bloodstone. It went straight the entire way until it started to open up. The ceiling and walls expanded until, within a few minutes, we found ourselves in an enormous cavern. There were doors and empty windows carved into the rock. Even the ladders were made from stone. I saw hundreds of these ancient homes, stacked one on top of another. A pale face peeked around the corner, its massive black eyes practically bulging out of its head. Hey, wait, I said as the creature turned and ran away. It looked vaguely human in its general body shape, but extremely pale, hairless, and with much larger eyes. I wondered if these were some strange offshoot of the human species, lost souls who had gotten caught down here thousands of years ago and had evolved to survive in these harsh conditions. It sprinted away, webbed feet slapping hard against the slippery rock trail sloping upwards through the center of these endless carved-out empty houses. Within seconds, I had lost it. It sprinted forwards like a greyhound, far faster than any two-legged creature should be able to run. I heard the wet smacking of its giant webbed feet receding into the distance, saw its long, mutant hands flying back and forth in time with its stride. A gunshot rang out. I kept running towards where I had seen the creature last. I saw a man in a black Kevlar vest and camouflage pants pointing a smoking R-15 down at the writhing humanoid's head. An exit wound the size of a grapefruit emerged from the back of its chest. It began to spit bright red blood onto its pale skin, its large, black eyes rolling in pain and terror. A man pulled the trigger again, and the back of the humanoid's skull disintegrated, a waterfall of brain matter and dark blood streaming out beneath it. It started to form a spreading puddle on the cold stone. Hey, I cried out, shocked. It's a person. He looked up suddenly. I saw he had tanned, almost golden skin and very dark eyes. His face and head looked freshly shaved. His entire demeanor screamed military, or perhaps a hired gun. He pointed the rifle at us. Put your hands up, he said slowly. He had a strange accent that sounded vaguely Caribbean, but I couldn't place it. We all put our hands up slowly, though I saw Bear's fingers twitch as if he wanted to go for his pistol. Where did you come from? Death Valley, I said. Of course. Where did you enter? He paused, looking at us for a long moment. Don't worry about me, he said. What's your name? We introduced ourselves. He grunted. You all need to turn around. My agency is currently doing excavations in this area, and we don't need civilians running around. It's bad enough we have these things crawling everywhere. He pointed to the white, mutated corpse bleeding at his feet, emitting a rank smell of shellfish and coppery blood. Is that the mark of Cain? Blair asked. We were told to watch out for something called the mark of Cain. The man laughed. The mark of Cain looks nothing like this. Those with the mark lose all their skin. It just peels away. Hard bones start to grow over their bodies. They grow black veins, throbbing with poison all over the outside of their faces, arms, and chests, and their eyes and mouths turn a rotten, sickly shade of green. You will know the mark of Cain instantly. Their blood is poison, and they are almost impossible to kill. They have regenerative properties from whatever strange chemicals flow through their black blood. No, the mark of Cain is much uglier than these poor idiots. These creatures are just inbred descendants of some long-lost race. We call them the fishmen, for obvious reasons. Looking at the webbed feet and hands and the slimy, bone-white skin, I could see why they would name them that. They even gave off a fishy, salty odor as if the smell of a faint ocean breeze blew through the passageway. "What agency do you represent?" I asked. The man paused for a long moment, looking like he was thinking hard about the answer. He opened his mouth. "Well, it depends who," he started to say. A resonation began to sound, cutting him off. At first I thought it was an earthquake sending off echoing cacophonous vibrations through the cavern, but as it grew louder, I could hear the shrieking, harmonizing notes of some massive trumpet. Rocks started to fall all around us, first just small pebbles from cracks in the ceiling and walls, and then larger and larger stones. I saw the soldier spin away from us and begin running towards one of the houses carved into the stone. I tried calling him, but I couldn't even hear myself scream in the din of the deafening trumpets. With my adrenaline spiking, I motioned for Bear and Stephanie to follow. Without looking back to see if they would, I started sprinting towards the same house the soldier had entered. I did not want to lose the one person who might know what's going on. The trumpet cut out as suddenly as it had begun. I heard the heavy thudding of many booted feet behind us. I glanced back quickly and saw dozens more soldiers, all armed with AR-15s and bulletproof vests. They screamed something at the soldier I followed, but my ears rang so loud I could only see their mouths moving as if from a silent movie. I figured it was something along the lines of, "What do we do?" But by then the second trumpet blast had sounded. My ears rang as the soldiers' mouths moved, yet it was as if no sound came out. Bear, Stephanie, and I got inside the carved chamber as the second and much shorter trumpet blast cut off. The last ringing vibrations disappeared down the endless tunnels. For a long moment, nothing happened. The soldiers continued to run towards us, screaming and asking for orders. I heard a hissing sound, as if a gas main had been cut. A suffocating, chemical smell began to fill the cavern. I took a deep breath and held it. A sense of rising pressure seemed to fill the air. Then the ground outside the house erupted with fire, like a hydrogen bomb going off. Clear blue flames shot up in the center of the tunnel floor. I heard a whooshing sound. As the inferno spread, long tongues of flame rose, licking the stone walls. The men stopped in their tracks, their uniforms immediately starting to catch fire, their skin liquefying and falling off in molten drops. Their mouths opened in a silent scream. I could hear the sizzling of their bodies, like bacon grease spitting out of a hot pan. They danced, jumping from foot to foot, their arms punching at the air. In a matter of seconds, I saw all their clothes disappear into smoking ashes, blowing away from their bodies in the slight wind that blew through the cave. I felt no heat at all standing on the stone floor of the ancient house, but I smelled the burning hair and searing meat of their melting bodies. Within a few more seconds, only blackened skeletons stood there, the grinning skulls still looking in our direction. Before they collapsed to the smoking stone floor, the fire disappeared as quickly as it had started. The boiling blue flames seemed to suck back into the earth itself. Bear and Stephanie looked at our new companion with horror-struck faces. He did not look nearly as perturbed as I would have thought, seeing his entire company wiped out. He simply shook his head. "Blackwater keeps sending us rookies," he said, giving us a half smile. "They gotta learn somehow, right?" We learned that the man's name was Agent Garland. He was vague on why he was down there with hired goons. We hadn't talked for more than a minute when we heard a strange wailing coming through the town. Everyone went deathly quiet. Immediately, Agent Garland's eyes went wide, and he started breathing fast. I looked out the threshold, peering to the right, the direction we had come, and seeing nothing but a smooth stone passageway. Stephanie stood on my other side. I heard her gasp. I turned my head to the left, and immediately knew what had scared her. It looked like thousands of black silhouettes slithering and limping and twisting down the road, coming closer and closer to us. I saw pure ebony shadows in the shape of venomous snakes dozens of feet long. Others had 2 legs and 2 arms like a man, but their limbs looked as thin as sticks, and their bodies stood 20 feet high. Their faces were expressionless, like a black ski mask with no holes for the eyes or mouth. The wailing grew closer, more insistent. It sounded like a mother broken with grief over the death of her children, a kind of hysterical shrieking that only amplified in the massive cavern. It bounced off the ceiling a dozen stories above our heads, echoing and distorting. Stephanie and Bear screamed behind me. Rivers of sweat ran down my face. There was a rule about this, I yelled, barely hearing myself over the wailing. Stephanie. And Bear continued to look at me with wide, staring eyes. Agent Garland simply smiled, waiting. I tried to remember the list of rules. Though this happened years ago, I remember the panic that set in as my mind drew a blank. There was too much stress, too much going on around me. I couldn't focus or think clearly. I took a deep breath and cleared my mind. In an instant, my subconscious started spitting up pieces of the rules. I remembered slowly. The rules discussed not looking at the face of a baton, getting off the main path if the trumpet sounded, something about the angel of death, killing people with the mark of Cain. It came to me in a flash. The rules had said something about shadows attacking us through our eyes. Close your eyes, I screamed as loudly as I could. The wailing was right outside the empty stone threshold now. Without looking to see if my friends had heard, I slammed my eyes shut and waited, counting the beats of my thudding heart. The wailing cut off suddenly. I felt a presence standing directly next to me and heard a low, guttural moaning. Something cold gently caressed my back and arms before rising to my cheek. Soft footsteps fell all around us, a sound as light as tall grass blowing in a breeze. Hissing, and a deep, choked gurgling erupted from something behind me. I felt more and more cold tendrils and hands pressing against my skin. A sense of rising pressure surrounded my body. I felt like screaming, my skin crawling. I tried to pull away, but I was surrounded on all sides by the grasping alien hands. They disappeared all at once with the sound of a massive balloon popping. I heard Bear slowly exhaling behind me. Agent Garland laughed. My heart beat a frenzied, runaway rhythm that pounded in my ears. Okay, it's been 30 seconds, Bear said, sounding out of breath. You can open your eyes. We decided to rest and have a meal in the house. The stress of nearly dying twice had done a number on us psychologically. I felt totally drained. I would have liked to lay down and rest. We had traveled for many hours. My feet screamed at me with throbbing blisters and waves of sharp pain. So what are you going to do now? I asked Agent Garland as I pulled out sardines and crackers. I tore into them ravenously, chugging a couple of bottles of Gatorade as I ate. Can you get us out of here? I'm not really in charge of this mission, he said without meeting my gaze. He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. The main group is down far below us. You would have to ask the commander. What are they doing down there? Stephanie asked, her curiosity piqued. Is there something important for national defense? Agent Garland smiled. There's something important for everything, he said, a cynical gleam reflecting off his face. Todd lives down there. He's kept locked up by the angels because, well, I shouldn't be the one who has to tell you this, but God has gone totally insane. He gave a large part of his mind to create the universe, and now he's slowly dying down there, like the serpent eating its own tail. We're actually in his body right now, walking through these tunnels of the bottomless pit. Those fires and shadow creatures are like immune cells, trying to kill all trespassers. Only those with the sign of heaven on their foreheads don't get targeted. What's the sign of heaven? I asked. He waved his hand at that. Nothing you need to worry about, because you won't be getting it. Only the angels have the sign, he said. It's like a white, pulsing symbol on their foreheads. It kind of looks like a backwards 7 with a slashing diagonal line through it. I don't know what language it is or what it means. The angels are not exactly conducive to talking. They're more likely to kill you on sight. Agent Garland got up, stretching and sighing. Well, this has been fun, but I have to meet up with the main group and report the casualties. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. But there's always so much goddamned paperwork. He pointed his index finger at the still smoldering bones accusingly. I saw only tiny fragments remaining now. The fine gray ashes blew in the light breeze down the tunnel. The cave not only cremates people, I thought with a hint of hysteria, it even spreads their ashes for them, almost like a loving family member. I shuddered. Agent Garland started walking out without a backwards glance. I jumped up. Wait, I said. Bear. And Stephanie joined in my chorus of yelling, their hysterical voices rising in a frenzy. You can't just leave us here. Do you at least know the way out? The way out, he responded, still walking away, is further in. If you find the center, you'll find the exit. There are many paths in, but only one out. So it is, and so it has always been. And with that cryptic message, Agent Garland disappeared around the corner. I wondered if I would ever see him again. After a minute of discussion, we decided to follow in Agent Garland's tracks. We hoped that if he was heading down into the deeper levels, the center where he claimed God lived, that we could simply tag along and get the hell out of this madhouse. And yet no matter how fast we walked, we couldn't catch a glimpse of him. I didn't know if there were secret tunnels somewhere in the thousands of stacked stone houses of Bloodstone. But if there were, we had a snowball's chance in hell of just finding one of them randomly. "This is BS, Bear said gruffly, sweating heavily again. He sulked like an angry child, fingering his holstered gun. We headed deeper into Bloodstone. It looked like it had once been a marvelous city. It had ancient stone posts where lamps used to burn. In the center of street intersections, beautiful statues of angels loomed over the dead land. The caverns opened up above us more and more. After it had risen hundreds of feet, our flashlights lost sight of it. The headlamps simply would not pierce into the darkness that deeply. These looked like the statues Michelangelo did, Stephanie observed, looking at a heavily muscled angel in a robe ripping open the jaws of a massive serpent. The angel's stone wings hung out behind it, long projections that dwarfed its body, but it looked different from the statues of angels I had seen. Its wings looked much more reptilian, like the wings a dragon might have. They had bat-like webbing between the pointed bones that ran out in a graceful curve to spikes, and its eyes had a sheen of cruelty and arrogance that came through even in the carving. I pointed this out to Bear and Stephanie. They looked slightly unnerved by the observation. Well, who's to say that the descriptions of angels done by ancient artists have any relevance to reality? Stephanie said. They could look reptilian, or could be made of light, or they could be totally extraterrestrial and incomprehensible. Humans only base observations of life on what they see on Earth, but they can't comprehend what other forms life could take. Maybe these angels aren't even from our planet. I thought about it. What she said made a lot of sense. Now, there's no way evolution would make such a similar creature to a human being, Bear said, speaking for the first time. I jumped slightly. These angels look like people with wings to a large extent. So either people and angels evolved from a common ancestor, or people were made in the image of angels, or I'm saying that these statues might not be what the angels actually look like, Stephanie said. Oh, yeah, okay, Bear said, returning to his sullen state. He continued to keep his hand on the holstered pistol, nervously looking left and right. I felt it too. There was a feeling of being watched. We continued to walk through the streets of Bloodstone. I caught glimpses of what I assumed were what Agent Garland called the fishmen. White, pale faces with large, black eyes. They were extremely fast, and by the time I even glimpsed one out of the corner of my eye, it had gone. But they didn't bother us. They seemed content with just watching us pass. Maybe they were more afraid of us than we were of them. We had entered a different part of the city with graceful towers that extended far up into the darkness when we encountered the first creature with the evil deformity called the Mark of Cain. These remind of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Stephanie observed as Bear smoked a cigarette, trailing behind us. I looked up the architecture with admiration. The ground floor of the massive stone tower had dozens of archways leading in, almost like a spider's compound eyes looking out on the abandoned city. These ancient people must have been powerful to build all this, I said. Do you think they tunneled it out of? A soft sound interrupted me, but in the silence, it came out jarring. I heard a choked, gurgling laughter. It was a soft sound that quickly faded to nothing, like a man with a slit throat trying to laugh in his final moments. But I could tell from the way Stephanie and Bear froze that we had all heard it. Bear took out his gun and spun to face the threat. A tall, twisted figure slid silently out of one of the shadowy archways of a nearby tower. Its head nearly scraped the top of the threshold, a height of nearly 10 feet. As our headlamps illuminated the newcomer, I saw a face straight from the wildest nightmares of a delirium tremens patient. The description Agent Garland had given us of the Mark of Cain paled in comparison to its true horror. It looked like its face had somehow flipped inside out. It had no skin or eyelids or hair anywhere. The bony, off-white skeletal plates on its forehead joined with raised cracks running across its scalp like ugly scars. Two eyes shone out with a shade of green that reminded me of putrefying infection and fetid swamps. They glowed with their own inner light. Dark, twisting veins ran like the slash marks across its entire body, throbbing with each beat of its alien heart. They writhed like fat worms, a rapid, quivering pulse passing through them every few moments. The creature's strange, green eyes glowed brighter with excitement and bloodlust. It had no lips, just sharp bones that met in a line. When its mouth was closed, I couldn't see any sign of it, but as its plated legs sprinted with powerful strides towards us, it opened its mouth in a silent scream. I saw its jaw unhinge like a snake's, falling down to its chest. more sickly green light flooded out, illuminating the entire street with its fetid illumination. As it got to within 20 feet of us, I saw that deep cracks ran through the rest of its body, zigzagging in small, tight lines like black stitches. There fired. It rang through the rocky cavern with a blast like a cannon firing. I saw the first bullet smash into the creature's face. Part of its skeletal face blew apart, the cheek shattering like ceramic. In a frenzy of bullets, Bear pulled the trigger again, and again in the space of a second. The abomination's kneecaps and shin bones were covered in white, bony plates, almost reminding me of some ancient gladiator's protective uniform. But the large caliber bullets of the pistol blew the legs of the creature apart in a flash of bone splinters and black blood. The smell of gunsmoke filled the air. I also noticed a subtler, but still somewhat foul stench that reminded me of sulfur and campfire smoke. It emanated from the creature's body, with an ear-splitting shriek like a steam whistle exploding. Its open green mouth erupted with cyclonic whirls of green light. A piece of the light spun off from the bubbling, frothing mass streaming from its mouth. The piece looked like some sort of floating cloud of ball lightning about the size of a basketball. It came at us like a cannonball from hell, blurring through the air. Rippling currents of electricity sizzled and popped as it spun, flying straight at Stephanie's head. An overwhelming odor of ozone followed it. Bear sprinted towards Stephanie. I saw it happen as if in slow motion. He tackled Stephanie to the cold stone ground. The ball lightning flew over her head and missed her by mere inches. As she fell, her hair flew up. A flash erupted as the ball lightning touched a lock of it. That part of her hair erupted into blue flames and disappeared without leaving ashes or smoke. The abomination dragged itself across the ground like a possum with a snapped spine, still emanating its steam whistle shriek. Its eyes and mouth flashed brighter, and the black veins pulsed faster. A moment later, another ball of green lightning shot out. The way it rolled off the larger mass of light reminded me of how vendors at the carnival swirled cotton candy around a paper cone. It bristled, shivering with its own trembling energy. Then it flew at me. I stood amazed as it curved through the air, this new death sensation that shone with a cancerous green light.